Greetings and salutations, viewers. I'm StarPrincessHLC, and welcome to Being Beauteous. This is supposed to be a visual novel a very short visual novel based off of the Cinderella story. So let's actually see what happens when we open the book. Let's do it in English, because why not? There was once a man who married for the second time to the haughtiest and proudest woman that anyone had ever met. He only had one child, a young girl who was sweet and kind beyond comparison, qualities that she inherited from her late mother, which annoyed her stepmother without ever growing weary of it. I don't know why I'm slurring today, but okay. As soon as the wedding had ended, the vixen had a sudden burst of grumpiness as she could not bear the qualities of the child, which made her two daughters, who were exactly the same as her, seem even more obnoxious. The more the young girl showed to be someone gracious and understanding, the more the woman felt humiliated and embarrassed. Such perfection burned her face more surely than any mirror, and not being able to stand that, the stepmother instructed the child to do the vilest of chores in the house. She was the one who cleaned the dishes and stairs, rubbed off the grime on the floor of the stepmother and her daughter's bedrooms, so that she scoured her skin. The young girl slept on top of the luxurious residence in a maid's room, subjected to the air currents on the most terrible winter evenings and on a wretched straw mattress. Yeah, not fun, huh? In the meanwhile, her stepsisters were in heated and auspicious rooms, where they had the most expensive four-poster beds and mirrors in which they gazed at themselves all day long, admiring themselves from head to toe. The poor girl endured all this in silence with great patience, according to the precepts of her late mother, and didn't dare complain to her father, as she feared that he would scold her because the stepmother had him under her thumb. Once she had finished her chores, she had huddled near the edge of the fireplace, sitting in the cinders, trying to warm herself, which was why in the house she was called Cinderella. However, even in her filthy rags, Cinderella was 100 times more beautiful than her beautifully dressed sisters. One day, the king's son arranged a ball where he would invite all ladies of quality from near and far. Some say it was his father's idea to hold the ball so the prince could find someone whom he fancied, as the prince was the perfect age to become king, but was acting stubborn and refused to marry. Cinderella's sisters were invited as well, of course, since they had a high reputation in the country, I guess. Okay. Overjoyed, the two girls quickly began searching for the dresses and coiffures which suited them best, which did nothing but pile more work onto Cinderella, since it was she who ironed her sisters' clothes. In their house, almost all they spoke of was how they were going to dress. "I'm going to wear my red velvet dress and my necklace from England," proclaimed the eldest sister. "Well, I'm going to wear my usual skirt, but to accent it, I'll be wearing my coat with golden flowers and my diamond barrier, which is not the most indifferent," the younger sister replied. So, as to adorn themselves, they called Cinderella for her thoughts on their outfits, as she had great taste, even though she was in rags all the time. Cinderella did her best to give them advice, and she even offered to fix their hair for them, and they accepted. The two siblings were so overjoyed that they were almost unable to eat for a whole day, and snapped over the 12 laces trying to tighten their corsets to make their waists look thinner. Which probably was hard for some of them, because who knows if they were actually, dining on fancy desserts while Cinderella was left to nothing. They were in front of the mirror nearly all day, contemplating themselves over and over again. When the awaited day of the ball came, Cinderella watched them off, her heart heavy, a touch of envy piercing her chest. Her, a girl who had never been able to leave the house, wished that for once, just once, she could see with her own eyes what a ball was, and have her own adventures like the ones her sisters always bragged about. The moment her sister's carriage disappeared into the distance, she began to sob. The empty house returned her tears in a mournful echo. The fairy godmother, who was passing by to say goodbye, she was leaving to return to her native country, saw her in this state and became quite upset. She was a fairy, as all godmothers were in ancient times, but because men had turned away from magic and didn't believe in it anymore, the fairies lost their powers and slowly disappeared into nothingness. Only Cinderella's late mother had continued believing in fairies to perpetuate the custom, but that was not enough to guarantee the existence of that fairy in particular, so she felt like she needed to leave like her sisters before her in their hidden realm. After seeing Cinderella in tears, she decided that she would allow herself to do one more good deed before leaving, and she asked her what had happened. Ashamed, Cinderella confessed that she wanted nothing but for one night, one sole night, live like her sisters did on a daily basis. Tenderly, her fairy godmother replied, "If that is all, then I shall help you to go. Consider it my departing gift to you." The fairy godmother thought deeply for a few moments, then declared, "Go to the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Okay. Except you're giving her the gift before the dress before the pumpkin. Cinderella quickly complied, finding the best pumpkin that she could while wondering how this could help her go to the ball. Fairy godmother dug out the insides, only leaving its shell. She then tapped it with her wand. The pumpkin suddenly changed into a beautiful golden carriage. She then told Cinderella to open the mousetrap a little and tapped every mouse that began to escape. The mice then changed into horses, making a fine team of 6 with a beautiful dapple gray coat. For the coach, the fairy godmother then tapped a rat with her wand, changing it into a big coach with one of the finest mustaches that anyone had ever seen. She told Cinderella to fetch her 6 lizards who had been hiding behind the watering can, and changed them into 6 lackeys, who then climbed onto the back of the carriage like that's all they'd done all their lives. Satisfied with her work, the fairy godmother promptly turned to Cinderella. "Perfect. Are you happy now? You can go to the ball." "Yes, but will I really be going in these rags?" As soon as those words left Cinderella's mouth, her fairy godmother appeared with her wand, and her vile clothing became a golden and silver dress, accented with many jewels. I don't know, it looks kind of bland to me in the picture, but Now on her feet, there were glass slippers, the most beautiful pair in the world. I'm sure those are a pain in the butt to walk in, by the way. I'd be worried about breaking them by accident. Thus adorned, she began to step into her carriage, but as she did, her stepmother warned her that if she stayed at the ball past 12 o'clock, the spell would be broken, everything would return back to normal, her dress into rags, the horses into mice, and her carriage into a pumpkin. Cinderella promised her fairy godmother that she wouldn't forget to leave the ball before midnight, excited and almost jumping for joy. Oh, we all know this is going differently, don't we? It was a whole new world for her. Wrong movie! That's from Aladdin, not Cinderella. When she arrived, someone had alerted the king that a princess had arrived that no one seemed to recognize, and when she came in the ballroom there was a long silence. The people stopped dancing, and the violinist stopped playing. Everyone was staring at the mysterious unknown beauty that had just walked in. Shouldn't they have had, like, guards or something, by the way? Just some girl wanders into the ball like that? That seems kind of weird to me. You'd think they'd be like, "Do you have an invitation?" All the women paid attention to her hair and clothes, making preparations in their minds to have something like hers tomorrow, as it would surely be the new trend. Bothered by all the looks she had never received before, Cinderella tried to be discreet, not having expected to be the center of attention. She saw some familiar figures and quickly went to go sit with her sisters to talk. It was the first time she was talking with them equally, which filled her with pleasure. While she was trying to be forgotten from the assistants and to integrate the habits and customs of the place, a young handsome man invited her to dance. You would also think, though, that, her face didn't change. It was just her, her outfit. You'd think they would notice that, but maybe they really didn't pay that much attention to her face. I don't know. The orchestra played what she had requested, a song that her mother taught her when she was a child. A wonderful little melody that you would most likely hear from a music box, light-hearted and playful. Oh, hey, they changed the picture there. After their dance had come to an end, she stood on the balcony, all by herself, humming the song again, wanting to engrave this memory in her heart forever. The young man followed her. He was captivated by her beauty, of course, but also because of her unusual behavior. She seemed like a dream to him, disconnected from reality, head in the clouds every once in a while, a bit clumsy, calm, and reserved, a true daydreamer. I don't know, that doesn't sound like a very good choice to me. If she's that much into a daydream, I don't think she'd be very helpful in the future, wouldn't she? It'd be kind of like, honey, I need to take care of something, and she's just off in La La Land. I'm just saying. The The other ladies posed like peacocks looking for compliments, complaining about the heat, drafts, time, food, everything. But she just stood there and smiled, a soft, mysterious smile on her lips. She sparked his curiosity. He attempted to talk with her, with rigorous politeness, curtsies that she had shot down as useless drivel. She simply began talking the way she always did, telling him stories and asking questions, hundreds and hundreds of questions. She seemed so odd in the landscape the man had grown up in that he began to feel more and more at ease with her, more at ease than he'd ever been with anyone else before. Their conversation was sincere without lies or any false pretenses. Aw, that is sweet though if you could be yourself around someone. He confessed his desire for freedom, his disgust of the golden cage that was imprisoning him, or so he felt. She led him on the path of her dreams, describing worlds she'd created in her mind and lives in lives that could have been hers. Drawn by her words that made him see thousand wonders, he stepped closer to her. She quivered. Her heart beat loudly in her chest. No one had ever centered all their attention on her, and she felt both flattered and embarrassed. They both seemed to understand each other. Even without saying anything, they could feel something unspeakable in the air. A spark, a blush, dry, writhing lips, longing for something. It must be true love! Seriously, you can't marry someone after a day. Cinderella had never been in love before, yet in the darkness of the balcony under the stars, his feeling appeared obvious to her. It was there, so close. A smile lit up her face as she took her turn to step forward, getting closer little by little. The mannerisms of that time would have wanted a lady to keep her distance, and the young man was surprised by this. What an odd girl. Is she real? Will she disappear if I touch her? Plagued by the influx of conflicting emotions, the sweet joy of no longer feeling alone and the fear that the others will slowly fade away, the man wanted to ensure her existence, and so he took her in his arms. Cinderella's heart skipped a beat. He felt it as they embraced. She closed her eyes, keeping under the eyelids colored sensations yet unknown. Lost in this nameless immensity, she remained still. Warmth of a distant sky filled all of her body. He must have felt the same as he looked at her forehead to forehead and stroked her hair. I found you. Their lips touched fleetingly. She would have stayed in the darkness of his bold arms for eternity if it weren't for reality grabbing her at the last moment. Cinderella had nearly forgotten what her fairy godmother had warned her about, so that she thought it was only 11 o'clock when the first bell rung for 12 o'clock. Unfortunately, time had not stopped for them. Horrified, she shook out of his embrace and fled as lightly as a deer would have done. Her ephemeral love would have caught her, but she was the fastest, leaving only one of her glass slippers behind, which he, the prince, picked up. Cinderella arrived home breathless, without a carriage, without the horses or lackeys, and without the beautiful dress she'd once worn, but still her eyes sparkled. She had nothing left from her splendor but one of her slippers, the same as the one she dropped. There's no doubt about it, fairy godmother must have left me with a little souvenir to remember that enchanting night, she thought to herself. Thanking her fairy godmother with all her heart, she placed the previous slipper somewhere in her attic, hiding it from the rest of her family. It became her talisman. Henceforth, every night before she went to sleep, she would open the cabinet in which she'd put the slipper in, and look at it with childish joy, humming her favorite tune, remembering the young man who danced with her once again. It was her little secret, her lucky charm, and thinking of it gave her the strength to surpass all the trials in her way. She never thought she would meet the young man again, and she was content enough with just having met him. He was to remain forever in her heart. A few days after, there were rumors about a great lady that had dropped her glass slipper on the staircase of the castle after the ball, which was picked up by the prince. Since then he fell ill, constantly watching the object, and certainly he was deeply in love with the beautiful person who owned the slipper. The prince thought desperately of ways to find the young woman again, then announced shortly after he would marry whomever fits the slipper. Again, though, this is really kind of a stupid idea, considering not everybody has. There's a lot of people with similar, size shoes. Just saying. Second of all, you didn't pay attention to her face if you were so in love with her. Just saying. Hundreds of ladies of high rank thronged to the palace to try it on, but unfortunately in that time, as in ours, most of the ladies had the same foot size. Cinderella had regular feet like everyone else, so he was unable to determine which of these wealthy ladies to marry, and it was obvious that none of them was the beautiful stranger he'd met at the ball. Also, they kinda did think of it this time. The king's son fell into depression, and no medicine could cure his melancholy. One day, a rich countess arrived at the castle, holding a glass slipper. She pretended to be the girl he'd been searching for. In reality, she had just spent a fortune by ordering a similar shoe in the hope of becoming queen, and because she was the richest and most calculative artisans under her auspices, had completed the work much faster than others, even though many ladies had the same idea at the same time. Even so, the prince agreed to marry her. She looked pretty in her red silk dress with her sweet little face. He then persuaded himself into thinking that the girl he'd met on the balcony had just been a dream, that she never existed, and that he'd been looking for a chimera. The countess's name was Angelica, and she had come from one of the wealthiest families in the land. Under her brown wig and angelic stare, there was a desire for endless power that could not be beat by anyone. Oh, so they have changed it a little bit. But yeah, that is a point. I did think of that too, that, people could, make a false slipper. Quite manipulative, she took no time in completely controlling her husband, forcing him to buy her the most expensive clothing and jewelry. After the marriage, the old king passed his throne to his son with relief. The prince was already completely disenchanted. Leading the kingdom was nothing close to being a piece of cake, and he had to satisfy people who never seemed to stop wanting without making any sacrifice. The slightest reform made him unpopular, and the crowd still screamed for change. After years of seemingly endless paperwork and crawling right under urgent problems, he eventually fell prey to limpness and just let his ministries govern the country in his place as he feasted in the palace, digging a deeper hole in the country's debt. Like if nothing was wrong, his entourage continued to tell him how good of a job he was doing, assuring him that he was still an important and powerful character. The court continued its hollow ceremonies, and rich people drowned their cares in wine and debauchery during long, expensive parties. As the new king ate and drank so much, he became large and pot-bellied, lost his charm, and wore makeup to hide from the eyes of all the aristocrats who had already noticed it. He no longer found comfort in his private life, as Angelica was making his life hard. Nothing was beautiful enough for her, and she often had fits to get what she wanted. On a mere whim, the brunette was a cold materialist. She wanted and wanted, but nothing seemed to satisfy her. Looking for new pleasures to experience, she also began to seek new lovers. The couple had never really liked each other, so it took more than 3 years before they jumped at each other's throats constantly. Determined as she was, Angelica decided their children's education, and the king could not say anything about it. Years and years passed. The last one seemed slower than the previous, crushing the king with weariness. Meanwhile, Cinderella led a completely different life. She finally found the courage to go against the will of her stepmother, who then kicked her out. The baker's wife, who felt pity for the young girl, took her in. She learned it and gained a strong passion for baking. Good for her. Get out of there while you still can, I say. Being young and pretty, she had also to endure the advantages of her, the baker, and had too much sincerity to open to his wife. Reluctantly, the baker's wife asked her to go away. Out on the street, and penniless Cinderella didn't give up for all that, and she crossed paths with a rich burgess who she sold her virginity to in exchange for money to open her own bakery. Aw, poor girl. Thanks to her tenacity, her business succeeded in a very impressive time. Soon, word spread all around the land, and in addition to the bakery, she developed a pastry for the attention of the wealthiest customers. Business went well for her, and as she managed to survive financial crisis without losing too much, she lived by herself, but she hired a princess whom she thought of as her own children. It wasn't rare for hungry street kids to approach the shop to try and steal a piece of bread, but she would always recognize their eyes salivating with envy, and would rather offer them a chunk of bread in exchange for help in the bakery. Yeah, that's a pretty good idea, actually. Everyone knew her in the neighborhood and praised her for her commitment and vivacity. There were a few courageous men who dared ask her for her hand in marriage, but she refused each and every single one of them, saying she was not worth it. No one knew how to seduce her. Some say you can still hear her humming a soft melody on rainy days when everything is gray, days that have lost their magic. In her heart, she had locked away the memory of her first love. Strangely, she kept the surname Cinderella for the rest of her life, even on the front of her boutique, so no one would ever know her true identity. Years passed, each one becoming happier than the last, infusing her a mysterious force. Nearly 50 years after the famous night when everything was started, the king was going to throw his last ball in celebration of the last of his children who was getting married. His eldest son had replaced him for some years now, and Angelica had died. To his great relief, she had gone long before him. Yeah, really. Well, was it she wanted too much, so she had to kill herself instead? I don't know. That's weird. He had the firm intention of disappearing into nature and drawing a cross on the hollow life that used to be his. The ball reminded him of memories that he thought he'd forgotten. On the balcony, just for a moment, he thought he saw that illusion again. She wasn't there, of course. How could she? She was only a dream, after all. Just a beautiful dream. In a state of melancholy, he told the musicians to play his song, the tune of the lovely stranger. Was she a fairy? Why did she smile at him? So many mysteries that he would probably never solve. Wrinkled like an apple, and bent with age, the old king disappeared from the palace after that final night. All he wanted was to end his life peacefully, to buy a small house far away, breathe fresh air in silence. He had planned everything. Plodding on the road with his walking cane, he had headed in a random direction, choosing his destination on a whim. He had gotten up very early that morning. The sky was fragrantly everlasting. While passing by the shops, feeling a bit peckish, he decided to buy a piece of bread for himself. And then they meet and they fall in love again, right? As he passed by a fence, he heard a hoarse yet charming voice like a bleating lamb. It was that melody, the same tune, sad and happy at the same time. Curious, the old king stooped and looked around. In a small garden near the bakery, an old lady was sweeping as she sang. Almost unconsciously, the old man began to hum with her. Surprised, the lady turned to him. With her tired little eyes, she saw a silhouette peering at her on the other side of the fence, so she began to approach him with an affable air. "Can I help you? Are you lost?" She was an arm's length away, like the other time, only the fence separated them. The old man recognized her immediately. Her faded blue eyes still had the same spirit, the same charm, the impression of coming from somewhere else. At a glance, he detected a dimple, a disheveled wick, narrow clavicles. Under that skin, battered by time, beat a weakened heart, but it was always the same heart, one of a blushing maiden. "Excuse me, but are you, he asked with difficulty. She watched him, waiting for a sentence that would never be finished. He inhaled deeply. "I've found you." She shuddered. A shadow of uncertainty passed over her nearly blind eyes as she stared at him. She held out her hands and gently touched the face that was offered to her. He came closer. She quivered. A burst of hope seized him. "It was you on the balcony that night, wasn't it? You do exist. It wasn't a dream." "It was a dream, and like all dreams, it was short-lived. I still remember, though. What an incredible coincidence to meet again after all these years." Enchanted, she invited him in, and they sat on a bench. They had many years to catch up on together. She admitted she never was a princess, that she had lived all this time as a simple peasant. He sighed he probably would never have been able to marry her in his father's lifetime. He also told her about how he had come to forget, how he had reassured himself, and how that had failed, how he had been through the ringer. She patted his head gently with a motherly smile. He felt like he had been freed of all his burdens. Then he decided to do something absolutely crazy. He asked her for her hand in marriage. Cinderella's eyes widened and her face turned red. She was old and did not have much time left. Neither did he. So it was either now or never, to finish their lives together while they still could. The idea was completely absurd, and yet she said yes. Aww. With the money he had left, the old king organized their wedding. Even though she was in her 60s, Cinderella still looked beautiful. She had this little something unspeakable on her lips, like a stolen kiss. Her white dress suited her perfectly. She protested, proclaiming that she looked ridiculous, but deep down she was happy that she had found her dream. The village mocked them, but they did not care. They were perfect together. And then, is there only one age to love? They found their bodies a few days later, wrapped in each other's embrace, like those old trees that could not grow by themselves. The gray hair of the old lady was splayed all over the bed like a rain of ashes. Her skin pale, she rested against the old king, her hands at her side, eyes closed. On her finger, her wedding ring shone. One would have thought they were just asleep, if it were not for their frail bodies, if the open window hadn't been letting a whirlwind of autumn leaves blow into their bedroom. On the sideboard of the living room remained the glass slipper which Cinderella had kept as a symbol of their first encounter. They lay together, engulfed in an eternal dream, their impassive faces wearing the most beautiful smiles that one had ever seen. Aww. Against the snow of being a high-statured beauty, whistlings of death and circles of secret music make the adored body, like a spectre, rise, expand, and quiver. Wounds of black and scarlet burst in the superb flesh. Life's own colors darken, dance and drift around the vision in the making. Shudders rise and rumble, and the delirious savor of these effects clashing with the deadly hissings and the hoarse music that the world, far beyond us, hurls at our mother of beauty. She recoils, she rears up. Oh, our bones are clothed with an amorous new body. Rimbod Illuminations. Well, that's the end. Well, that was strangely pretty and strangely interesting that they took a different turn with the storyline of Cinderella. That, they didn't actually find each other except, later on in life when they were elderly and then died in each other's arms. Kind of like the ending of The Notebook, actually. Spoilers for the ending of The Notebook, by the way. But yeah, it's amazing where you could just find true love in the weirdest places sometimes. And that, even at later on in your life, you can still find someone. You don't have to be, 20, 30, at the peak of your sexuality to find the person that loves you. But that's a nice little thing to take away from that, so. That was Being Beauteous. That was actually quite pretty, and I do like the art style. It was an interesting little take. Obviously, there wasn't much to it. It was a visual novel, but it was really cute, really sweet. And it shows you that, you can find love in the strangest of places. And sometimes you don't have to be young to experience, true love. So take that for what you will. That was an interesting little take on the Cinderella story. It was very sweet and very charming. It was a little sad at times, but I do say it was very interesting. So, I guess that's a good place to leave it off. So for now, this is StarPrincessHLC saying thank you very much for watching, and have a fond farewell.